today, and oh, this is a good one for you. My question to you is, do you want to launch a Kickstarter project, but are you feeling stuck in neutral because your project, whether it's a book or a comic or something other that's a creative project, it's just not finished yet? And is that the main reason why you haven't launched a project on Kickstarter yet? If that's you, if I'm speaking to you, I think you're going to like this one. I'm glad I'm able to hop on here because just a few minutes ago, I was actually hunkered down in my basement with my wife and the dog because there was a sudden tornado warning that just whipped through here. And so, internet went down, storm just out of nowhere, out of the blue. I was not ready for that. Living in New England, we're never ready for tornadoes. That's just not something that we really do here. So I get the feeling like you're not ready or you're not ready for this. And that's really what we're going to be talking about on this episode. Not so much tornadoes, but we are going to be talking about feeling like your project isn't done, isn't complete, isn't ready for launch. And so we'll talk a little bit on this video about how much of your project you should have done before you launch. I want to give you a little bit of a reframe on how you can think about the different ways to use a platform like Kickstarter, and sort of share that there is no one sort of right way to do it. And then I'll also share a case study and an example that I love of a creator who really just showed the power of starting small and getting his Kickstarter snowball rolling and having it turn into really cool, big stuff. And so if that sounds good to you, I'm excited to have you here. My name, if you're new to me, my name is Tyler James. And what I do is I help writers, artists, comic creators, self-publishers learn how to follow a step-by-step process to go from conceiving of a project that their audience will love and that they'll love too, planning it, prepping it, launching it on the Kickstarter platform, getting that project funded, fulfilling on all the promises that you make during your campaign, and in that process, level up as a creator. That's really what we do here. And so if you're tuning in, if you're a creator that has a project you want to bring to the world, I'm excited to share a little bit of what I've learned about launching. Because I'm really on a mission here to specifically make an impact in the community that's most important to me. That's the comics community. And I've been on a mission to make the comics category, the category on Kickstarter with the highest success rate. And it's a success rate that compared to all the other categories, there is no other category on the Kickstarter platform that over the last 4 years has had the same growth in number of projects and that are succeeding on Kickstarter as comics. We're a special community, and so I'm proud to be a part of that. What I'm doing here, though, is this is a part of what I'm calling a Just Launch It series. And these are a series of videos where I'm really tackling the biggest reasons why creators that have a project aren't getting in the game, why they're still sitting on the sidelines, why they're not launching. And so this particular issue is going to be especially valuable for creators who are, you've got a project you want to launch on Kickstarter, but the reason you're not launching is that the project just isn't done. Maybe it's going at a snail's pace. Maybe you're spinning your wheels and you're stuck in neutral. Maybe the project that you thought was going to be small has slowly turned into a bigger and a bigger and a bigger project, and you're feeling overwhelmed and you're sort of lost in the creation process. Maybe you're like some of the creators that brought up this topic and brought up this issue with me, like Kyle Rayos, for example. He said he's trying to put the work into the production in the first place, and that's where he's really focusing his work, and make sure that all the production is taken care of before he moves to that final stage, which is the launching. Or Matt Harsha, who just said, the reason I haven't launched is because my project's not done. I have a 3-issue book written. I'm working on rewrites, starting on the art process, but it's just not done. Forrest Helvey also said just finding time to get that project across the finish line is what's been holding him back. And he just doesn't want to launch a Kickstarter project until his book is done, until his book is finished. And so if any of that resonates with you, I think you're going to get some value out of this one. Again, before I get into my training on this, I did want to just make sure that you all knew about the upcoming Comics Launch Workshop. These are workshops that I do fairly regularly. Sometimes I'll do them a couple times a month. Sometimes there's only one. I don't only do them once a quarter. So you'll want to go over to comicslaunch.com kickstarter.com/workshop and sign up for the workshop if you want to hang out with me for about 90 minutes and learn some of the best strategies, tactics, tips that I've learned from my 18 successful launches and the hundreds of creators that I've helped with their successful launches. And so, because if you're thinking about launching a Kickstarter, whether you're thinking about it or planning your first launch, you know you're someone that's going to want to do it right. Or if you've launched before but just want bigger results and are looking for some strategies to get to that next level on Kickstarter, I think I can help you out. And this workshop is how I'd love to be able to do it. So you just go over to comicslaunch.com/workshop. You can register over there. All right, so let's get to the meat of this this series. We're really tackling in this particular video, I'm tackling that concept of, hey, Tyler, I'd launched my project on Kickstarter, but it's not done. It's not ready. Not ready yet. I want to get it done. I want to have it all done so that I can just focus on the launch. Okay. There's a lot of creators that think right now that or that take the approach where they will simply not launch a Kickstarter, say for a comic or a graphic novel, until the project was completely done, right? Or conversely, there are some creators that are saying to themselves, well, I need to have a certain percentage of it done. For some, it's 20%. For some, it's 50%. Some 70%, some 100%, right? Now, the reality is there have been successful creators who've launched at all phases of the project. And there are some creators that actually have launched and taken different approaches for different launches. Someone that comes to mind from the Comics Launch Pro community is a creator named Farhan Qureshi, who launched his first Kickstarter was actually for a digital-only version of a book called Digitopia for the first issue of that. And when he launched that, he had essentially a pitch package put together for that. So, and part of it, but he was trying to use the Kickstarter platform for this first launch to build up an initial fan base for the book, to help rally that fan base around getting the first book or the first issue finished. And he decidedly wanted to do digital only because that would limit the risk, so that he wouldn't just have to, because he was funding and helping to fund some of the production of the book. He didn't want to have to fund production and shipping all in one go. And so by making it a digital only, it sort of reduced the risk a little bit for them. So that's definitely one way to go. All right. Now for his second launch, he actually did a second launch where he did a launch for the same book, only this time it was for a print version of that same book. So for his first launch, he only had about 5 pages and a cover or two done. But for his second launch, maybe it was a little bit more, but he only had like the beginning of it. And he used the Kickstarter funds to help finish the book. Now, for his second launch, the book was complete. It was 100% complete. And really, he was just using those funds for the print run. So again, there's a lot of different ways that you can go about this. Some creators out there that are able to successfully launch massive projects, with big goals, with nothing more than a pitch. And actually a part of their pitch is, hey, I'm going to raise this funding and use this funding in order to make this thing. And they basically essentially ask their audience, do you want this enough to trust me with the ability to go and create that? And if you want it, I'll do it. If they presumably, if they didn't get the funding for that, they wouldn't have made that thing. Now, others go so far as to wait until the book is completely finished, and then they're just using their print runs, their funding to go to print. That's actually what Comics Tribe tends to do. That's what I tend to do for the projects that we create. Usually we'll complete it, and we're going to Kickstarter shortly after, just right when we're ready to go to print. And we'll use Kickstarter essentially as a fundraising tool to help us offset our large print runs. But you can actually go even further. I've actually gone so far with some of my other projects to have to launch a Kickstarter for a product that I've already placed an order for. So I actually made it a limited edition product, and we basically sold out of that product during the Kickstarter because our initial production run was such that we sold through everything that I had already ordered. And what was nice about that was I was able to deliver those pledge rewards to our backers in record time because the order was already in. So the truth is, there is no hard, fast rule here, all right? You can, and there are successful examples of creators who successfully successfully launch using all of those strategies. You can find examples of all of those. So if you're saying it has to be one or it has to be the other, know that that's a belief, but it's not a truth. Okay, it might be a belief you have or a desire that you have, but it's not necessarily the truth. But one thing that is absolutely true is that the more complete your project is, the more complete your book is, the more pages you have in, then the more that is done when you launch your project, then the less risky that project is going to be. That project is going to be less risky for you, the creator, right? There's less things that could go wrong. That, you know, God forbid, if you're working with an artist, he gets hit by a bus or something comes up. Like disaster strikes. That tornado that hit me, that hits you, and now all of a sudden you can't work on your book like you thought you were going to be able to work. Like, a lot of those issues go away if the book is already created, and you can really just focus on the Kickstarter to just launch it, right? Doesn't mean the risk goes away completely, because there's always going to be some risks, but it mitigates a lot of those risks. It mitigates them for you. It also mitigates them, or at least the perceived risk, for your backers. Because they can see how much you have done. They know that there's less things that could potentially go wrong. And therefore, especially if this is your first launch or you haven't established yourself on a platform like Kickstarter as someone who delivers on the promises they make there, then it can be a little bit daunting and a harder sell to strangers or people that haven't backed you before to take a risk on you if they can't see that you're very far, that you're far along on your journey to creating this thing. All right. It's also true that, all things being equal, the more the project you have done in advance, the more funding you're likely going to be able to raise on a platform like Kickstarter. And the reason for that is because Kickstarter is a visual platform, and having a lot done is going to give you the opportunity to show more of your project. The more you show, the more you'll be able to make backers trust. The more you have done, the more likely you are to be able to go out and get reviews or endorsements or creator blurbs. I had a couple members of my community reach out to me asking for a blurb or a pull quote for their book to sort of an endorsement. And that's something that I can't give you my endorsement on a book that you haven't created yet, right? But if you've already created it, there's always a chance I can read it, and if I like it, or if I have good things to say about it, I can lend that, and so can all the other pros out there that you know, or even non-pros, even the websites or the critics or anyone with a platform or a channel. Like, you can get those endorsements, and those will help make people trust your book. Also, the ability, like, if you have the book done and maybe you've sold an advanced version at conventions, or you sold earlier issues in the series at conventions, like, you can have the ability to have pictures that show that there are real other human beings out there other than you who can vouch for this book. And all of that is going to lend a lot of credibility to your Kickstarter page and to your Kickstarter campaign. And so what I've got to say is, if you're someone who is delaying your launch because you want to have as much of your book done, or as much of it ready to go, and in order to mitigate risk and to make a better Kickstarter page and to make a better pitch to an audience, if that's you, I'm okay with that. I love, and one of the keys to success that I go over in my Kickstarter workshop is the need to show that you've put some skin into the game and that you've invested in this project. You've got to invest in your projects before you're going to be able to get anyone else to believe in them and want to invest in them as well. All right. But that being said, I do want to point out two areas. All right, two little areas, two little problems, two little warning signs that you may be using I'm not launching because my project's not done, as an excuse instead of as a valid reason. All right. And so these are sort of two things that are going to be some warning signs, things that I'm going to throw a little tough love at you if this is you. All right. The first one is project launch scope. All right. And this is one thing that I see happen, especially with younger creators, but sometimes this happens to even veteran creators, is that they have this vision for what their Kickstarter is going to be. And they've been sitting on the sidelines for so long that they sort of build up this grand vision that it has to be, like, their launch has to be this amazing, just blockbuster of a launch. and they let the project get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then they say, well, we can do the trade collection, but maybe we should do a hardcover, or how about an oversized hardcover? Or maybe we should, well, you know what? I want to really shoot for it, and I want to design a dust jacket that it goes into. And you know what? I saw another project had plush toys, so I got to contact some vendors and start. And oh, you know what? My vendor said they can do plush toys, but now I need a 3D model that I have to. And before you know it, like, this project just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And in part 2 of this series, one of the fears that we talked about is the fear of your audience not being big enough. And what I said there is that the truth is, on a platform like Kickstarter, you don't need a massive audience to have success. However, the bigger your project gets in scope, the bigger an audience you're going to need to actually make that possible. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see creators making is they get fixated on the biggest, most ambitious version of the project and the product that they want to create. And they start spending years in this getting ready to launch phase, and and years on this production phase, and years in development, and years and years and years where they're actually not launching anything. And as a result, what often happens is when they do launch this big, massive project that they've put all this work into without launching anything in the interim, this big, massive project that they do launch is suddenly something that's beyond their fundraising abilities. Now, here's like a gamer analogy, right? Can you imagine, like, I'm a recovered game addict from my early years as a kid. I was the first kid on my block to have the Nintendo. I had the old robot, the Robbie the Robot. You guys probably don't even know about that one. but like, can you imagine someone who's a gamer and they spend all of their time studying the user manual and reading blogs about the games and watching other gamers on Twitch and downloading the strategy guides and upgrading their computer systems and buying the fancy controllers and reading the magazines and perfecting everything, doing everything that there is to do to be an awesome gamer, except actually playing the damn game. And then, not only that, when they're finally, quote unquote, ready to get in the game and play the game, because they've done all of that other stuff, they assume that they are an advanced player. They skip the tutorial mode and they crank the difficulty level settings up to, the expert level, right? Well, what happens if a gamer would do that? What would you expect to happen? Now, I'm sure there's some gamers that'll be like, oh yeah, that's what I do, and I'm awesome. But most gamers, especially if they weren't familiar with the game and hadn't actually played the game and never actually got that down, they're going to get creamed trying to play it on that high advanced level. And I see that happen time and time again with creators who say that they are that the reason they're not launching is because their project's not done. And the truth is, the project that they are making is way beyond what they should really be focusing on. And they should actually be taking a much smaller approach to launching something smaller for the audience that they do have on the way towards working up the muscles towards that bigger launch. Now, a great example of a creator who did this that I want to give a little love to and a shout out to was a creator named Curtis Clow. Curtis is a listener of the Comics Launch podcast. And so I been watching him a little bit and seeing what seeing what he's been doing. But his very first Kickstarter, he launched his very first Kickstarter, and he did it really just to get his feet wet and to dip his toes into the Kickstarter water. And so, because I think he was getting overwhelmed with the prospect of like this big launch coming, especially when he didn't really have an audience yet. And so what he actually did was he launched what is essentially the smallest conceivable project that he could launch within, say, the next 30 days of when he sort of conceived it. And that was actually to put out what he called a mini issue, which is essentially just like a big, nice premium print that contained, a really cool image and then a short, basically a single page story And he launched that on Kickstarter, taking advantage of Kickstarter's Make 100 initiative. So he just made 100 of these prints and got them out there. Now, was this a blockbuster success in terms of funding records and backer totals for Curtis? No, it wasn't. But what it did do was it got Curtis off the sidelines. It got him onto the Kickstarter platform. It got him starting to build his name, and it got him his first 12 customers that have exchanged value with him, right? Raised $168 for this mini issue and got the ball rolling for it. But what's great about Curtis is I know there are some creators out there who don't want to launch a small project or don't want to launch something under one of these Kickstarter initiatives like Make 100 that just encourage you to get out of your own head and just launch something and get it out there and get your feet wet and dive in the Kickstarter pool. Some people are saying to themselves, well, I'm not going to do that because, I don't want to waste my Kickstarter launch credits. I don't want to use my put my chips in on something that's just really small and is not going to move the needle too much for me. And because I'm worried that might affect my ability to launch again in the future. Well, Curtis realized, maybe he didn't realize, but what he ended up finding out was that that's absolutely hogwash, because Curtis's next launch, his next launch was actually supported by 313 backers when he was ready with his first issue of his comic, raised over $6,000. Then his next comic for a book called Beastlands was his first 5-figure campaign, 467 backers. That's a lot of backers, right? And what I love about this is that Curtis actually, with these subsequent launches, he had been through the entire Kickstarter process on something much, much smaller. And so that all this stuff wasn't new to him. And he was able to just use the Kickstarter platform with a very small, focused launch to get over his fear of launching, to get in the game, and to get things rolling. And it's turned into something. I think he has another launch that also did, I think there was another 5-figure launch that he's already done. I'm not showing here. So Curtis is running, man. He's in the game. He's building a following, and he's making really cool comics. And I sent him a pull quote for, I think, Beastlands, because it's a really good book. All right. And so that's something that I wanted to point out with you. The project creep is definitely one thing that you want to avoid. And so if you find yourself that your project's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and is getting pushed off because it's so big, I want you to challenge yourself to think, is there something, if you had to launch something on Kickstarter in, say, the next 90 days, what would it be? And is there a smaller version of the grand vision that you could build a launch around so that your next launch for the bigger version is a little bit easier, and that you already have some Kickstarter backers and some momentum going for you, which will make that a little bit easier. Now, the other thing that I want to make sure that you're not letting hold you back is, or the other warning sign that I want you to keep an eye out on is this one right here. It's moving deadlines. Because if you are someone who you're saying, all right, Tyler, I'm not launching. And the reason I'm not launching is my project's not done, but your project should have been done a month ago or 3 months ago or 6 months ago or a year ago. And you find yourself continually pushing back the deadline and pushing it back and pushing it back and pushing it back for your project, then that may be a sign that there's something else holding you back. And one of the things that I'm sure we've all heard of, the concept of Pareto's law, the time it takes the time you have to complete an activity is actually going to be what it will take to actually complete it. And if you condense the amount of time that you have, you'll get it done. It might not be perfect. It might not be but perfect is an illusion anyway. And so one of the things that you may find is that by not committing to a launch date, a firm launch date, that might be the reason why you're not launching. That might be the reason why you haven't launched it. And so you want to check in with yourself and say, hey, do I keep moving this completion date down the line? And why is this happening? And what would happen if I started, firmly putting my foot down and saying, this has to happen at that point. What would that look like? All right. And so that's what I have for you guys today. Again, I want to affirm you and say, you want to be ready. You want to be confident in the product that you bring to Kickstarter. You want to know that you're proud of what you have. You want to be able to show off as much of it as possible when you do launch. And so if all of those reasons are and you're working towards that, if those are all true, then I'm okay with you using the reason of not launching because my project is not ready yet. I'm perfectly fine with that. But what I will say is that if you find yourself continually pushing that deadline back, or if you find yourself in a position where your project is getting out of hand, then that may be something that is a sign that there's something else going on that you want to look at. Mark Romero said, yep, our deadline moved back for 4 months before we put our foot down on a date. And I'll tell you this, like, this still happens to me. Like, there's projects that I have not launched yet. And the reason I haven't launched that is because I didn't put a nail on my calendar and say, this is when we're launching, and then start doing the things that I have in my Comics Launch Pro, that are the same stuff that I teach my students. If I'm not doing those things, 2 months, 3 months before my targeted launch date, then I know that launch date isn't going to happen. But it's like, once you can actually put that date on the calendar and start executing your plan that you know is going to work to making it a successful launch, that's what makes everything go. So if you haven't scheduled it, get it scheduled, get that completion date, get your entire team fired up about that completion date, put some stakes in the ground, tell your audience about it, let people know it's coming, find an accountability partner to check in with you to make sure that you're hitting your marks, and just commit to it, because that's really going to be what's going to make it actually happen. All right. And so I want to just leave you with all of that, and I hope that helps. Yeah, again, if you want to just join the conversation, if you're someone that hasn't launched, or if you're someone that does have a really big project, if you had to launch something in the next 90 days, what would that version of what would it be? What would a small launch be that you could launch in the next 90 days? Let's say you had to do it, or let's say you would get an extra $5,000 just handed to you if and only if you launched in the next 90 days. What would that thing be? All right. Yeah, last just reminder, if you are interested in going deeper on this stuff and want to join me at my next upcoming Comics Launch Workshop, it's called the Ultimate Comic Book Kickstarter Launch Plan. You can register at comicslaunch.com/workshop. 7 keys to unlocking your best Kickstarter launch ever this year and beyond. So thanks so much for watching, everybody. And I can't wait to see what you launch next.